Welcome to the I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast. The podcast is dedicated to conscious souls looking to change the world. Astrologer by day, climate activist by night. Here is your host, Debra Silverman.
I am only human. I have my faults and my shadows that are as bright as the light that shines within.
And we get to do another podcast. And we're with Brenna, and this is an opportunity from the I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast by Debra Silverman, or with Debra Silverman, to delve into a super cool chart. Most of the podcasts that I've done, Brenna, I've shied away from the astrology charts and just done very brief encounters because we've been talking about their story. But in your case, your chart is so cool that, and she doesn't see, I tried to tell her how cool her chart is, but of course it just sounds like every astrologer says it's everybody. But your chart is so cool that I don't want to not pay attention in this podcast specifically about how you've embodied this chart, because your chart specifically has to do with the future, which is why you've got that backdrop. Look, she's going to write it down. Oh my God. We're going to record this, you little Uber. We're recording this whole thing. She's so used to writing things down. That's the cutest thing. Okay, first of all, would you introduce yourself and just tell the audience what you've done with your career and why, like just your professional Capricornian self?
Sure. Yeah. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you so much for having me, Debra. It's quite an honor. My name is Brenna Simmons-St, and I am based in Denver, Colorado native. Had the blessing of born and raised in Telluride. So lived in Telluride, Colorado for most of my upbringing, and that really shaped a lot of who I am today. Spent about 7 years after that in Hawaii on the island of Oahu and did my college studies there, started to launch my professional career there, and really started in hospitality for corporate social responsibility about 15 years ago. Before that was really a thing. So even in college.
Futurist, do I hear futurist? Aquarius, got a little Aquarius in her, and Moon in Gemini, great communicator. Keep going.
Thank you. So when I went to school, there wasn't really any programs for sustainability, and being born and raised in Telluride, environmental stewardship and social well-being was always something that was very, very important to me. So I crafted my own major. It was an interdisciplinary study with an environmental certificate and a business major.
Wait. Do that once more. Say it again slower.
So I crafted my own major.
I didn't hear the name of it.
Oh, so it was a business degree. So I have a bachelor's in business and then a certificate in environmental sciences. And it was
what was the thing you said? You crafted
interdisciplinary studies.
This is so Aquarius. So she's 29 degrees Aquarius rising. You have to know that you're very fast. You know this. You've got speed on your side and you see things so quickly. It must look like we're all moving in slow motion.
Most times, yeah.
Like you're like, why can't they get it the first time I say it? I'm imagining as a kid that your mind, your ability to get things, why are we doing times tables again, said Brenna. I already got it the first time, right?
Pretty much, yes. Yeah.
It's okay to admit that. Okay, I'm just going to share your chart because I can imagine it's a little bit at times, the excessive ability you have. For just a moment here, we're going to go straight to the chart. Hold on one moment, please. Like I know how to do this. There it is. And I'm going to make it, this is going to make it, there we go. So you have Aquarius rising at 29 degrees. If this birth time is accurate, you were born when the horizon was just about, because there's only 29 degrees in the sign, it goes to 0 next. It was the very last degree, the most sophisticated degree of the futurist Aquarius that sees things very quickly, is in the future, humanitarian, does not want to conform to what's happened before. And then you have Moon in Gemini, which trines that in art and language of astrology, which means that your Moon is the emotional nature. In Gemini, you can communicate what your futurist saw very succinctly, very quickly. And then, of course, you're a Capricorn in the house of Aquarius, in the 11th house. So here we go again. The futurist who is not only thinking about what should be, but wants to implement it, said the Capricorn. She can't just talk about it. Her Capricorn's like, can you show me the results? And then to top the whole thing off, on the very top of your chart, this is where your mom was when you were born. Right above her head was Saturn. This is the planet that is the most important to every Capricorn because it describes purpose and discipline. So this whole lifetime, you're driven by time, function, purpose, and discipline. I love that she's writing it all down. So you can see the Saturn is influencing her. She can't do a half-assed job if her whole life depended on it. She's got 3 planets in the house of the futurist, 2 of which are Capricorn. Let's get shit done. Aquarius rising at the very last degree, which makes you super sophisticated as far as the future and wanting humanitarian goals. And then the moon in Gemini saying, I can talk about this. Talk about this till the cows come home.
That all resonates so deeply. It's incredible how much you pick up on all of that.
But that is all based on stars. And this is why I've always wanted you or your husband to come study, but you're busy. Now I want to come back to your job because when you speak about Aquarius tells you, I'm doing an interdisciplinary and ecologically sustainable. I'm like, those words, I'm a little slow. You can't tell by looking. So you worked in the hospitality realm and you helped them this was back then. Now you're still doing some of this. Tell us what you mean by sustainability. You're helping us get sustainable. What does that mean?
Well, that's a deep question that I'll answer and then take us further, actually, Debra. So sustainability in definition is merely sustaining things into perpetuity. It's a balance of the give and the take, the equal energy exchange to simply sustain systems. And that was, where we needed to get a few years ago. That's still where a lot of systems and structures that govern our lives need to get right now.
Give me an example.
Yeah, so most of what governs society, humanity, is actually based on degenerative systems. If you think of it on a spectrum, it's the far, far left. Systems that exploit, extract, they take out, but they don't replenish, they don't heal. So logging, our energy systems, education, healthcare, transportation, the built environment. You think of anything government that governs our lives right now is based on extractive, exploited systems where they are taking value out of the earth or out of people for gain of the institution. And so that's where we are right now in the arc of humanity. Sustainability is one step to the middle of that spectrum, merely sustaining so that we have enough to continue life on earth for humanity into perpetuity. But that is not really a beautiful, thriving world. That is still a world with a lot of hurt. If we keep moving further down the spectrum, our goal, we need to get to regeneration, where we've healed all of the harm that has been done in the past, recreate systems that sustain and allow life to thrive moving forward and do no more harm. And those systems exist. We're creating them right now through the Alliance Center, which is the current organization that I'm leading.
Okay. I swear, I feel like you're from the future.
I've been told that before.
And you're working backwards. Like you can see a humanity where we actually consider the long view, the future generations, how to keep the planet healthy. Like this is a brand new beep, beep, beep. Because our system, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. What occurs to me is as a human, my brain is selfish. And I have had to train myself to think about giving rather than taking, about sharing rather than saving, about making others be more important. But it's so contrary to the programming that my computer system came with.
Absolutely.
But that's not true for you as Brenna. You seem to be someone who thinks about the other. Is this true in your life? Can you give us an example, like even in your family, like you must be the family glue that brings everyone together, like you're constantly in service to them. Is that true or is that true?
I think it is true. And something I'm trying to learn, though, is how to also receive the help because of whatever mission I've been sent here to do and I'm on. I try to do everything myself because I can see it and I know it needs to happen. And, as you said earlier, I move very fast. And so it's one of those, like, I can do this and just cut through it all and get through it with myself. But how do I slow down, bring people along, find alignment, and then accept and receive that support in both my personal and professional world? So that's kind of this new evolution or growth edge that I'm on right now.
And I'm going to come back to this because I want to understand more the actual application to how our society and your companies that you're working with are creating sustainability. But I just want to take a dive into your psyche. What describe for me your spirituality? If you had to give words to what you believe in or what your deepest knowing is, how would you verbalize that?
I mean, I think it's very complicated and very near and dear to me, but I think the simplest way I could put it is just the interconnectedness of all source energy to all things in all space and time. You know, that right now, as we sit, we are, you are, I am, we are all connected, and we're all energetic frequencies kind of vibrating through space and time, and how those frequencies manifest shape our reality. So I think just a deep, deep interconnected knowing. I do have a very spiritual practice, so I meditate every single day. I definitely notice the days I can't meditate that I'm not me. I'm not as centered or grounded. So it's become a very disciplined practice in my life, but one that also has just really creative nourishment. And
When did you start meditating?
About 15 years ago, I'd say.
How old are you?
I'm 35 right now.
So you came in at 20 years old, found that meditation served you, and you've been on a mission. And it's almost, I feel like the gift of your lifetime for those that have been watching, because I know people that know you and everyone's blown away by your capacity, is that you are a role model for what it's like when you know what you came here to do. And can you remember that? Like, did it come to you all at once, or has it been evolving? Because Saturn on your midheaven describes someone with a purpose. My child has this too. And I just see that since he was little, he actually had a dream when he was like 3 years old, where like a mouse told him that he had a purpose here. Like what? But I'm imagining you're carrying that similar kind of feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, I always had a very deep sense of purpose and calling as a child. You know, I was always like the one when I was 6 years old calling to set up the vet appointment for the dog. And I remember the vet calling back my mom and being like, did we really need to set that appointment? And they just like went along with it. So I always had a deep sense of direction, and just like, I know it needs to be done, I'm doing it. And it got me in some trouble as a kid, because when you're a child and you're trying to, you know, advocate for yourself in a child's body, adults don't always see that. And I'm even struggling with that with our oldest Louis. He's, you know, very similar to that right now. And how do you kind of capture and honor that in a kiddo? But I remember there was definitely some inflection points in my life. And there was one really big wake up. I got in a really bad car accident where I should have died and I didn't. I was wearing this moonstone necklace and still wear it to today. That woke me up right out of high school. And I think it was kind of like, girl, you are here for a
You should have died and you didn't. What happened?
I went off, it was midday. I was by myself, wasn't wearing my seatbelt, and I lived in Telluride, and I went off about a 70-foot cliff, like head off, and rolled several times down. And the car could have landed in any which way, shape, or form, but it landed wheels up, facing back to the road. And I got out and scampered up the cliff that I never should have been able to climb. And when I got up there, there was an off-duty police officer waiting on his motorcycle who had seen the whole thing and was able to call an ambulance. And there was an ambulance right there. Didn't have a broken bone, didn't have a cut on me, Debra. I no blood, no broken bone, but my soul was bruised. And I could feel that. And I just knew that was probably one of the deepest inflection points in my life, that I was here for a purpose and I was going to serve it. And if the longer it took me to wake up to stepping into that service, the more I would be slapped in the face, so to speak. So that was a really big wake up call for me. I had just done about a 14-mile river with my parents that day in an inflatable kayak, and was going in town to party with my friends that night. And that accident woke me up in a deep way. But it took a while. I was 17 at the time. Took me a while to come back to really understand what that meant in my life. So that was one big inflection point. And then there's been a few others, but I'll pause there because that one's very
And what was the moonstone? How did that relate to the moonstone?
You know, I don't know. I was wearing it that day. And moonstone since has just always had meaning for me. And once I realized that, I started doing research on, you know, what moonstones represent. And so they've always just been kind of a good luck charm for me. And even like when my husband buys me more jewelry, he'll usually have a nice moonstone collection now, but it's, I don't know. It was something that my 17-year-old brain could make meaning of.
No, I think what you have to know is that your soul, clearly what I'm imagining you're thinking there were angels involved or somehow there was protection without question. It made no sense.
Yeah.
that your soul is being protected and provided. And that's the manifestation. I want to get back to your work ethic and why you're so driven, but it sources from that young imprint. And I'm imagining, was there one more event that happened that really nailed opened the coffin?
Yeah. I mean, there were so many that I keep. The journal I'm writing in now is called Expanding Consciousness. And it's the form of a diary I take of multiple, 20, 30 plus moments of metaphysical transformation that were either visions or sights or messages from guide or source energy.
Perfect. It's so perfect, this background you have. So now let's go back to the Capricorn. So what I wanted to point out was you've married the magical, this is my intuition because we've never met. So let's leave that part. We've only the magical,
nice to meet you, Debra.
Nice to meet you. We've done readings when I've looked at your children's charts because one of our mutual friends, I don't do readings anymore, but I love working with people who I know are influencers. And so she described you and I instantly went, oh, she's one of those. She's been given the task. She's fulfilling her task. How can I give to her? Because you're the kind of person who, and I want to get back to that. You've been inspired by directives and you pay attention and record the messages. And now bring us back to the Capricorn world. Are you seeing evidence where your efforts of trying to bring us into the future are being heard or received?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Very in an overwhelming way, actually, that it's almost opportunity overload right now with the organization I lead. So the Alliance Center is the organization I've been with for about 8 years, and I've been the executive director for almost 5 of those years. And as one of those, it's a nonprofit. So my earlier career, I spent 10 plus years in corporate social responsibility, like in the belly of the corporate beast, driving change from within, very siloed, usually one of the only people asking or demanding for environmental or social change, whether it's internal operations or the impact in the world. And then when I moved back to Denver, I learned of this company called the Alliance Center. It's a nonprofit, and it's really kind of the hub of sustainability for the state. And when I moved here, everyone kept pointing me back to the Alliance Center. You got to meet this group, you got to meet this organization. And the moment I stepped into the building, I just fell in love with it. I could just feel the energy. It was where I needed to be. And it took me 2 years to make a career change there. I applied to 3 jobs before they hired me. And they hired me 8 years ago as the events manager, then worked my way up. And now I'm the executive director of the organization. So that's just a little bit of context. And the Alliance Center also has a futuristic pull. Ever since its founding in 2004, it's been innovators of the future. So there's trend after trend that I could name that the Alliance Center saw.
Give us a concrete example.
Sure, yeah. So we were the first shared space in Denver, co-working space, and now there's over 30 in 1 square mile of us. So we opened in 2004. Yeah, and flash forward to today, that's really the trend where work is going. And if you look at how the pandemic impacted the normal workplace, a lot of what we're seeing from employers as they return to work is less of a footprint. So they need less space and they want to commingle with other offices to keep price down. So we think that trend's going to just continue to accelerate. So that's just one of them. So the Alliance called me to it, and it took me, like I said, 2 years to finally get into the organization after applying 3 times. And I've been ED now for 5 years, was promoted from within. And to answer your question, how do I think the world is responding to this futurist vision? So when the pandemic hit, a lot of groups, individuals, people retracted, and rightly so, right? We were facing one of the greatest crises of our times. Safety was paramount, and we didn't know what was coming at us. I sat in deep meditation during March of 2020, multiple times a day, just connecting into source. And that was my own survival mechanism too, right? That is how I kept myself from spinning off my axis. And it was a series of meditations that this vision came to me. And it is the Regenerative Recovery Coalition, which is the newest body of work the organization is running. We launched it in April of 2020, right during the height of the pandemic, through a series of listening sessions called the Colorado Emergent Series, where we gathered hundreds of people virtually all around the state to hear from them about what is changing in their life and what do they want to see going forward, recognizing we don't want to go back to normal because normal was broken. It was broken for people, it was broken for the environment. Yet the rounding call for everyone around the world is, I just want to get back to normal. But normal wasn't working. It hasn't been for a long, long time. And the foresight, this very deeply known calling that I had in me is that most people are resistant to change. I happen to love change. It's invigorating for me, but I know most people hate it. And I also knew, and this was March of 2020, that it wasn't going to be a 2-week stay-at-home order, that whatever was coming was going to have broad sweeping impact in all systems that govern our lives from tip to tail. And so if all of those systems are already changing, now is the time to get in with a strategy to build forward in a way that breaks down systems of oppression, allows for us as humans to heal the centuries of embodied trauma that we've done upon ourselves, each other, and the natural world, and allows us to create new systems that allows all life to thrive, where we learn to be in harmony with each other in the natural world. So that was this vision that kept coming to me March of 2020. And the organization responded, the Alliance Center, in forming the Regenerative Recovery Coalition. It now has over 380 members in the state of Colorado. Within that membership, we have 7.2 billion in managed revenue and 28,000 jobs in Colorado's workforce of people who are being attracted to this vision and who are coming forth, linking arms side by side and saying, let's bring this vision to reality.
I need you to give me a concrete example now of how that, because I heard it, it's amazing, but I'm wondering, how does that translate into English?
Yeah. So the coalition works in 3 main ways. First way, we work with the executive and legislative branch of the Colorado government. So we provide thought leadership and counsel in the state's recovery plans. All told, we have influenced over 44 new state laws in the last 2 years and directed $982 million in state funding towards the solutions that we're working on.
Like, give me an example.
Sure. Yeah. So there's amendment. It was 2 years ago. It was 1181 is a statewide soil health amendment. So it actually prioritizes soil health in Colorado's agricultural systems. And now we're working with the Colorado Department of Agriculture on a statewide soil health challenge to raise money through private sector philanthropy to then reissue to local farms and ranches to apply regenerative practices to their ranches that helps increase soil health, draws carbon out of the atmosphere, increases water retention.
All of it. This was the entire weekend I just spent with the regenerative agriculturist from Savory Institute, which I'm sure.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. With Daniela?
Daniela and Bobby, who was the voice. He's so brilliant. Beautiful. But let's go back to because I know if I were someone listening to this podcast, I'd be like, really? Like, wait, do that again. Because it's a little fast and it's a little bit profound. It's so alternate to your point. I think normal is just a setting on the dryer anyway, but the normal reality that it used to be, you're introducing another point of view, which is, help me if this is true. I think this is true. You're trying to figure out, in the name of your children, how do we create a future where the earth is actually being tended to, from the soil to the businesses to pollution to recycling. I'm imagining these are doors that you are all working with, like the plastics. I keep, every day goes by and I'm like, I cannot believe the continual production and consumption of plastic.
Yeah.
And what's the action step? And is there regenerative or sustainable means that we are introducing? Is that a topic that is in your?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the other policies that we worked on and some of our members worked on this year is called extended producer responsibility. So it actually puts the responsibility on the producer of said product. So the Pepsi can has now the responsibility, Pepsi does, to grab that can back in their waste stream and recycle it into their own use. Same thing with plastic. So yeah, we do a lot of work with the circular economy and waste as well. And I should back up and say, so during the summer of 2020, when we did the deep community listening sessions, we were listening in for themes and values that came out from people, no matter what we were talking about. And we came out with the 8 fundamentals of a regenerative recovery. And the circular economy is one of those. And those 8 fundamentals are how we frame our work, how we organize our policy solutions, how we organize the projects that we lead. And so it is looking at broad systemic change across, all the systems that govern our lives, from democracy to government to how we move our goods, services, and waste, to our energy, to our food systems, to our housing. And so it might seem very broad, intentionally so. Part of my philosophy is that environmental and social solutions have only been partially successful because we've compartmentalized them. We've put social change over here, we put economic change here, and we put environmental change here, and then we break up in groups and work on them. But those are partial solutions for partial problems. And so I think we actually need to welcome the complexity and recognize that we are complex beings in a complex system. We can't just silo and compartmentalize solutions and problems. That's just going to get us more of the same.
That's so profound. Okay, I'm going to ask you some funny questions I ask people on the podcast, and then we're going to come back because I feel like I have 20 questions for you. But let me ask you this first. If you weren't talking about sustainability and regenerative agriculture and all this fascinating content, what would capture your attention? Like, what would you be doing if let's say the planet was in a position of healed? What would Brenna be doing?
I don't know, honestly. I'm blank. Usually I have lots of things.
I'm going to suggest you would be studying astrology and opening up your brain to be able to channel. You are a channel. And the channel's been singly focused on how we're going to help the planet. But just think if your channel had a wider bandwidth of what options there were, your creativity would increase. So the channel would change topics. But you clearly are a channel, in case you were wondering. Tell me this. This is a great question. I wish, if you could finish the sentence, I wish that people would
live through their hearts instead of their heads.
Bingo. You're going to get the right answer on that one. Okay. Tell me, what is the one thing, what is one or two things that you could not live without? Like they give you life force.
My spiritual practice, most definitely. I only get one or two things.
Gemini moon.
Yeah, I would say my spiritual practice and then my relationship with nature and my loved ones, if I can mix two.
Totally. There's just your point. They're totally related to a Capricorn. She loves those trees like she loves her kids.
Yeah.
Okay. And if there was someone that wasn't alive that you could sit down with and have, or maybe alive, but someone that you really respected that you wanted to sit down and say, can I just have a conversation with you? Who would it be? Any particular mind that would capture your?
Right now, if I'm thinking alive, would be a lady by the name of Laura Storm. And she wrote a book called Regenerative Leadership that I am reading and just love it. I'm obsessed with it. Do you know her?
No.
It's very interesting because I started reading it like 2 months ago and reading it again now. But when I went through it for the first time, it was a lot of the things that I'm doing just intuitively as a leader. She is documenting and putting it in writing and making it tangible for me to see, and then also, for other folks. So it's a required reading for everyone on my team now. But I would love to just have a glass of wine with Laura Storm and pick her brain.
We're gonna make that happen. Hey, when is the last time that you cried?
Yesterday.
Yesterday? What happened? Can you tell us?
Well, I threw my back out yesterday, actually. I was walking around, true Capricorn, right? I was walking around the house holding my 2-year-old cleaning up, and I just bent down too many times with his weight and threw my back out. So I've been in a lot of physical pain the last 24 hours.
You couldn't tell by looking.
Oh, well, thank you. I've got like a heating pad on my back and arnica pills, but yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the balance factor for Brenna with the ambition of Saturn on your midheaven and double air and Aquarius rising. How do you balance? It's a really good question. Do you balance?
I'm always striving for balance. Sometimes I'm better than not. I think when I get out of balance, life has a very comical or abrasive way to wake me up and say, you're out of balance here. So you need to find that. That was actually my mantra last year, was find the balance. Because I was out of balance. A lot of, last year I was backing up when the vision and the work for the Regenerative Recovery Coalition came to me. I was pregnant with our second son, Tucker. So his energy was within me as we were literally birthing this new program, birthing this new work, and, took 4 months off to be with him. And then when I came back to work, that balance was really hard to find between balance of my 2 kids, balance of my husband and I, balance of my personal and professional work. And then within the organization, the Alliance Center, the Regenerative Recovery Coalition took off so fast. It's magnetic, it's attracting to it, and it's also expansive. It is growing every day. It's like the opportunity overload I spoke about. There's so many groups that want to work with us on it, so many solutions that need to be implemented. So the balance of how much of my time was focused on the core operating of the business that brought us from 2004 to present day versus this new bright, shiny baby that was demanding all the attention. So that was also a big thing for me. So yeah, balance. I feel like if I can find balance, everything is in flow. And if I'm out of balance, then it's really evident to me. Once it becomes evident, then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm out of balance and need to figure out where to go back to that. But I think flow is a way that I kind of gauge if I'm in balance or not, how much things are in flow.
And so back to this, that makes so much sense. Back to the career and your implementation inside of our society to introduce these new concepts. People are finding you because, tell us how they find you, the businesses, and is it corporate as well that they're interested in being able to change their?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the coalition is both for-profit, nonprofit, academic, and government leaders, community leaders, media leaders. And so you can join, you, Debra, as a citizen and also as a company can join. So we intentionally work across all sectors, again, looking at, we can't silo business solutions here and government solutions here, and here's what academia is going to work on, and here's what nonprofit's going to work on, without the word I use almost every day now to exhaustion is cross-pollinating. We have to cross-pollinate all of those solutions and all of those change agents. And that's what the coalition represents. So it's good work that's kind of already happening, but folks are finding us because we're a catalyst, we're an incubator and accelerator. We can find where those solutions have friendly partners, whether they're philanthropic or in the government or in business, break down barriers and then accelerate solutions together. And I can give some examples too.
Yeah, give us a concrete example. I really want to hear, like, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to invest with you guys, what would I be investing in a concrete way? If you can give me an example.
Sure. Yeah. I guess from like a philanthropic investment into one of our projects, we have a large project in the coalition called an Equitable Workforce Development Project. And if you look at this next decade of change that we are facing as a globe, as a society, whether we like it or not, is going to be a massive infrastructure shift from centralized grids run off fossil fuels and extractive industries into more decentralized systems that have more of a crowdsourced, community-led approach. And one of those big things that we need to do is transition our buildings and our built environment to run off an electric grid. So solar and wind, most of our renewable sources is electric, but our grid is set up for natural gas as well. And so we have to have all of our homes, all of our buildings run off electric grids, not natural gas. And that causes some infrastructure transition in buildings. Our workforce is not set up for that at all. There's a huge scarcity or a huge shortage of skilled labor in the skilled trades that's needed for this infrastructure transition. So we name that as one of our big areas in Colorado, and we're leading a statewide workforce development project working with credentialing agencies and community colleges to upskill and reskill the workforce to be ready for this massive infrastructure transition over the next decade so that our homes, our businesses, our buildings are ready to receive the electric grid. The other thing that's really significant about workforce development is if you look at what's happening in the narrative around climate change, we have a lot of climate deniers saying that climate change is going to hurt jobs all across the nation. Jobs are our livelihood, jobs drive the economy. That is so true. There are so many jobs, more jobs to be had in the clean energy economy. So how do we actually take that narrative into a solution and say, you are right, and climate change and clean energy jobs can actually act as an accelerant to local jobs, well-paying jobs, and that become a stimulant to local economies, not a deterrent. So how can we actually flip the climate change narrative from workforce as a problem to workforce as a solution? And so that's what we're doing through a clean energy workforce development project. And there's a lot more nuts and bolts and tangibility to that. I just gave you broad brushstrokes.
How do you sleep at night? Are you someone that falls asleep easily, or does the voices keep going?
Depends on how much caffeine I've had. The voices always keep going, but I also have a kind of a practice to unwind at night and welcome in that sleep because it's so needed.
And do you have a full night's sleep? Is it because your mind is so brilliant?
Oh, thank you. I haven't had a full night's sleep for about 6 years, but that's not because of my mind. That's because of my kiddos. So I look forward to getting good sleep once again, someday, maybe.
Because your youngest is
almost 2 and the oldest is 5.
So so they wake you up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mom.
Yeah. But I have a very hands-on husband though, so that helps. He's really, really helpful.
I know. I loved your husband.
Yeah, I do too.
That was so cool. Okay, so because I'm watching your intellect and the capacity for you to take information, and it seems like it's like breathing for you. It's the easiest thing.
Sometimes it depends on the topic.
But I mean, I'm wondering when you're around people who don't move at that speed, what is that like? Like but if they do, I guess you inspire your leadership style. I'm interested to hear about your leadership style since that book was so compelling to you. How would you describe it?
Ever changing and ever evolving. It's funny. I have been nominated and received different awards over the years. And as I go through those narratives, I was just reviewing last week one from like 6 years ago when I answered that question. I was like, oh, how cute. Like you were so naive 6 years ago, Brenna. And how I would answer that now is just so different. But yeah, I think you're extremely insightful, as you already know, and the astrology lines up too. But that's one of my greatest challenges is how do I meet people where they're at and build alignment and then move forward together. That's something that I'm always conscious of and have been doing some work on, but I have a lot of growth to do there. It's like I know up in here what needs to happen. And sometimes even as I say it in this present moment, it doesn't have the same meaning and it doesn't land the same way as it would from the future. So it's very
right, exactly
to figure that out. And I think a couple things happen. One is I burn people out. And, sometimes I've been said I steamroll or I'm up on my high horse or high and mighty. And it's like, I'm really not trying to be high and mighty. I'm just like sharing something that's coming from my heart. But I think what you had said kind of at the beginning of the podcast is a lot of human brains today, we are groomed to have that self-view.
Exactly. This is the T-square. You have this very, very advanced, the moon is opposite Saturn. You can see that big red line. So can you see that? The opposition there? There's the moon. It looks like a moon opposite Saturn and Uranus. And then it's squaring 90 degrees to your mark. I think what you have is you're very good at change. To your point. You've got this mutability. This is the mutable category right here. And you've got so many planets. And mutability is the capacity to take new information in and move on it. Like they love change. They love collecting data as compared to fixed people who are like, no.
Yes.
Way too fast, way too much. No, they say no all the time. They're supposed to, because they hold down the fort. You're creating wind, like the picture behind you. You're creating movement. And so I could see, yes, your natural ability to trust, which comes from that spiritual orientation that was put in place at that car accident, where you really got that the angels had your back. Mm-hmm. So I imagine fear is not something you live with.
It is and it isn't, honestly. I think, there's fears of like, are my kids going to be okay? Or, things like that. But stumbling over my words a little bit, and it's hard to say this, but I do know that things are going to get worse before they get better. The time of change.
Thank you for saying that. Everyone on this podcast has been speaking to this. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we're really facing, a period of extreme disruption, and it's good disruption. It's going to be really scary and crazy when you're in the middle of it, if you can't see the other side. But we're in the birth canal of a new humanity. And if you kind of think of like, what does childbirth look like if you have no clue what's going on, right? If you were never told what that is and you're watching it either from outside or inside, you think that mother and baby are dying. That is just the most agony, blood, mess, chaos. What is that? But if you really know what's happening, you can embrace the beauty of that birth and know that the pain gets us to the other side. And so I think we're in the birth canal of humanity.
Brenna. For the last, I'm going to say 30 to 40 years, I've been using this analogy so you just like literally recited what I say. Pretend you were never on this planet before. You're on a movie watching this woman. She has this thing come on her tummy. It's like the weirdest looking thing. She's throwing up. She doesn't seem, and by the end, she's screaming. And all you want to say is, get the thing off her tummy. She's miserable. Look at her. And you don't touch it because you trust it. And out comes these little teeny eyelashes and the fingernails. So everything was wrong. And that's exactly what's occurring right now.
Yeah.
That point of view, Aquarius, only can work if you can see the future.
Yes.
If you can't see the future, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So back to my point about you being a futurist. So you work backwards with faith. And I just want to name that. So you must know this, that the people around you require you to communicate to us as you're doing today on this podcast, because you can see the future. And what do you see?
How far in the future are we talking?
Well, first, there's the hard part. Let's not leave that yet. There is a really long cycle coming in the next, what would you say predictably, when do you think we'll begin to feel the effects of the climate shift?
I think we've already felt it. I mean, if you are talking about climate change.
I'm talking about fires. I'm talking about the water. I'm talking about the fish. I'm talking about the coral. I'm talking about the ice. I'm talking about the...
Yeah, I think it's already here. I think it's going to be unmistakable, irreversible in the next 10 years. I mean, if people aren't seeing it, I think they're intentionally not looking for it or telling themselves lies so that they can keep going on in their current day. But I think we're facing, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we're facing the next probably 10 to 15 years of massive destruction, decay, dissolution of old systems, which is a good thing. We need that to happen while we are then building up from anew. And if you think of regeneration, I think is the best term. We are in the age of regeneration. We really are. And I can go back through the age of separation and what got us here, if that's of interest. But I think we are in the age of regeneration. And first, we need to
the age of separation. What would you point to?
Yeah, and this is also why I want to meet Laura Storm. She outlines this in her book, the most crystallized, concise way I've seen it. And I've read hundreds of books on the same topic. Basically starting about 10,000 years ago. And there was a extreme temperature drop, really. And it made humans start looking at nature as something even further from themselves that we had to defend ourselves from. And then that really started the agricultural revolution, right? So we started to become sedentary, actually started to manipulate the land to create villages, and that created more separation, man from nature. And then about 500 years ago, there was another big dip, about 10 degrees C in global temperatures that further exacerbated that separation. And at that time, and still now, female feminine energy is more related to nature. And so the more humanity started seeing itself separate from nature, then it was also separate from female. And so then we had the separation of man from nature, man from female, and that just kept going. Every big revolution that we had continued to exacerbate that. So then the next one after 500 years ago was a scientific revolution where we started to actually break everything apart to study it. And that was when we went from interconnected theory to basically compartmentalizing everything, further separate from nature, an atom further separate from its cell, man further separate from woman. And then after that came the religious revolution, right? And the church really used that fear of woman to perpetuate the Salem witch trials. Further on, man from nature, women from man. And then each of those next ones. So what was that? After technical was the scientific, then there was the agricultural revolution, scientific revolution, industrial revolution, even more. And that's where climate change really entered, or our impact on climate entered. And right now we're in the technological revolution. So each one of those stages further separated us from ourselves. And I think the age that we're dawning right now, the age of Aquarius, as was forecasted many, many times ago, is the age of healing and regeneration before we can then get into the next real evolution of humanity. We're in a time period of healing right now.
Yes, we call it, my friend who I'm working with, a geologist, said we're in transition. She talked about there's been 17 ice ages on Earth. Mm-hmm. Like when you take that into perspective, we are going through a temperature change. It was predicted before the humans. Yes, we've exasperated it, obviously, and the plastic is a symptom of us. However, the Earth always regenerates. Mm-hmm. She's like the most endlessly generative, generous, like we're in love with you, Mom. And she's a little irritated with us.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And to that note too, Debra, I think a lot of our work right now is about extending the time humans can have on this earth, because the earth is going to go on well before us. I mean, and well after us. It's been here for billions of years. She will continue. We're not here to save Earth, right? Like we're here to see how much longer this human experience and experiment can last on Earth, given how much we've changed the climate. She'll shake us off like a bad case.
Here's my theory. Want to hear my theory? I've been saying this for so many years. The other thing I've been saying is about the birth. It's so funny you named that. Is that we're a bad design. The nature of the human brain, unlike yours, the Aquarians, the Geminis, the ones that are advanced and willing to do the 11th house future, the brain is built for protection. We spend more money on defense than anything else on this planet. We expect that we're going to be dangerous. We We lock all the doors. We're built for feeling scared. We're built for trauma. So as a psychologist, psychotherapist, my practice is to say to people, there's only one way to alter that bad program that the computer came with, and that is to turn on the observer, meditate, take a breath, and come back to your heart. So you can't get to the heart without stepping out and then realize where you want to go. Because the default is to slip into the brain, and it's noisy in there. And it's not a nice voice that runs that machine.
No.
It's an awful guy, whoever he is. I don't know what he ate or what happened, or mom and dad, but the program. So my invitation is, you're at the practical Capricornian level, making systems that will implement in a concrete way. I am introducing thought that will get people to be open to you, which is why I'm doing this podcast. People, I've gotten some feedback, why are you doing climate crisis on your podcast? We want to learn astrology. Excuse me? What is astrology if not a whole system that is above and beyond us, trying to take care of mom? So they are directly related. And as we really honor this conversation today, especially, that one, meditation. So tell us a bit about your meditation practice. Like, you're religious about it. You do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been trained, or is it something you've created, or how did it come to be?
A little bit of both. So I shared earlier, I was born and raised in Telluride, Colorado. And so my parents moved there in the early 70s, late 60s, kind of they were part of the hippie days in Telluride. They had so much fun back then and still have a beautiful community there. But within that, my mom had a lot of kind of alternative practices, right? Like, we saw a nutritionist that didn't guide us by the food pyramid when we were kids. Imagine that. We went to both Western medicine and holistic doctors. So that was just always part of my upbringing. And there was an energy worker who lived in Telluride at the time. Her name's Alea Dow, and now she lives in California. But she's a channeler. She's a meditative guide. And so I did work with her, in the physical space when I was a kid growing up, just different workshops, acupuncture and stuff like that. And then her journey took her to California, and she started doing a lot of kind of services online and doing guided meditations that you can subscribe to. And so that's really how it started. She sends you a meditation every morning, Monday through Friday, and you can sit down and take it whenever you want. And so that's what I started in my 20s, just to experiment with it and see. And I just noticed such a shift in how I could show up from being very present in my life, away from kind of the multitasking, scattered brain of the go, go, go culture that, is all around us. And so I just started noticing those changes in me and started experimenting with meditating more or less, or, doing my own practice. And then ended up just having some really deep visions that, like, there's no other way that you can describe that except for some sort of source energy, that really clued me into it. And so I started experimenting more and more, studying fractal theory and sacred geometry. Astrology, something I really do want to study. I haven't been able to yet, but just started studying it, and then taking kind of the analytical information I was receiving and then practicing it in my body of being and doing the meditation. And then, like, now I'll do it. I still do Alea's meditations every day. I just really love her work, but then I'll always do my own.
Her name is talk so fast. Can you spell her name for us?
Alea, spelling is not my strong suit. Where's her name? There it is. Aleya Dao, Dao.
So beautiful. It's so beautiful to hear that this is for everyone to hear, that you may have children or grandchildren or neighbors or kids that you're around. And when you introduce them, which is one of my roles as a fairy godmother, it's one of my favorite jobs. When you introduce a child to meditation and suggest the thought and then leave it with them and watch them evolve in their own terms, which is exactly what happened with Brenna, their soul will emerge. This is the future. The children are brought up understanding that they are a soul.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think too, so much of the work, when you can tap into that level of being, so much of the work that I know I do isn't even here on this physical dimension. A lot of it is shifting energy in other dimensions. And, I could give you 200 plus examples of where that has happened in my life, where something I'm struggling with, I sit within meditation and actively send it up to my higher self to work on in the higher realms, rather than trying to fight through it here, because it's so dense. This is an intentionally dense human experiment. So how can we move things faster and more fluid in the higher realms where vibrations aren't as dense? I can give so many testimony to actually seeing a lot of that happen. yeah, I'll stop there. But I guess one more thing I wanted to add too is another thing that I've been practicing these days is tapping into different ways of knowing. So from what I've seen and read, I think there are kind of 4 different ways of knowing. One is your somatic knowledge, like in your body. There's the emotional knowing as well, what your emotions are telling you, our intuitive knowledge, and then our analytical brain. And we all have all 4 of those in us at all time. And we have bred and groomed a species of only using our analytical knowing. And all those other ways of knowing, we have compartmentalized out age after age, generation after generation of only giving credence to analytical knowing. And that has produced broken, siloed compartmental systems that are governing our lives and extracting and exploiting each other, ourselves, and the world. And so the more I think we can tap into all 4 ways of knowing in any situation, the more I think we can tap into source wisdom and working in this dimension and others. And so that's something I'm always practicing.
I love that you're standing in the colors and the lights are behind your head because you're so presenting. I know how grounded you are, and you're running a very significant business with many, many people that are in the business, like literally corporate. And there you are amongst the stars speaking. So thank you so much for today. This has been so enlightening that your soul at such a young age, introduced obviously by your family and Aaliyah, and having had this influence of your spirituality at the base note of everything you do, that's your first thing you can't live without. That sets us all free. And that's the example. We're echoing each other. I think why we liked each other immediately was because we're similar.
Yeah.
At a very young age, I had a purpose. I knew exactly what I was coming here to do, and nothing's ever deterred me or distracted me because I'm in love with my purpose. So when I asked you the question, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? You were like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's such a primary source. It's your very essence. And it's a worthwhile question, said the elder, is that once the children are gone and once the life continues in its own forms, then that's what I loved about COVID. I was face to face with myself, stripped of my outer ego identity. And it was a very profound, probably one of the most significant growth cycles in my lifetime was the solitariness of COVID. And while we all wanted to get back to normal, I realized that that definition of normal was such a contrived word to begin with. And by the way, our operating system, as normal would call it, is so not okay. And so thank you for being so advanced. I see the humanitarian in you, the Aquarius rising. I see the 11th house, which is Aquarius again, the futurist, that brings forward a new technology that's already been waiting for us. And the discipline of Saturn on your midheaven, that you're so similar to. I have a very similar effect of Saturn. People say to me, why am I a workaholic? And I'm like, why don't we call it funaholic? I mean, I'm having so much fun. I don't know, how did it get called workaholic? And the balance factor, to your point, meditating, knowing when to stop, and knowing that in the future, it's already done. I'd like to give you that gift. It's already done. You're just catching up to the future. So there's no need to run. And with that assumption, if you start to premise that, because we can see the future, I always say it's 60 miles east of here, we can see the future, and it is a place where we do find ourselves once again. The transition is going to be very uncomfortable, and that can't be understated. When the fish stop swimming in the sea, when the ice melts, when we find out the fires are happening in Colorado again and we can't go outside, there's going to be a window of time where you'll remember this podcast, where the question will be, do you have your internal emotional stability based on your relationship with spirit? Because in the end of the story, this is a volunteer position. No one pushed us in the bus. This was an absolute agreement that you and I made, and everyone listening, different roles. Clearly, Brenna's a very good listener. She spends every day listening in meditation. I do say the same. We're having a podcast coming up soon this summer with Christian Sundberg. You might want to listen to him. Yes, S-U-N-D, Sun with a D, Berg, B-E-R-D, Christian, like the word Christian. He remembered his past life. Oh, no. He remembered his previous life before he came in and incarnated. And he, like you, is super grounded. I'm convinced he's a Capricorn. I don't know yet, but he's a project manager on a nuclear plant. So he works in the world, but he is fully remembering where he came from. And this is a very important conversation that we're having. How much is our memory intact of, one, where we came from, and two, that it's going to be all right?
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah. I'll speak to that just quickly. Is a lot of times when I meditate, I'll get visions of the time spiral continuum. And I'll get a clue of where in that time spiral continuum this vision is coming from. And I will get snaps of a past life or messages from a past life, or the guides that speak to me a lot are called the ancient ones. And so I know when they're speaking from the ancient ones, it's coming from that past time spiral continuum. But I cannot link together a full lived experience, but I get flashes of many of them time and time again. And it definitely informs what I'm doing now and gives me, more faith in the source connection. But one cool thing, since it is a podcast about astrology, I wanted to share as well quickly is,
Yes.
so Debra gave the gift of reading my son's charts, and Louis, who's 5. A lot of what you picked up on his chart is what Western medicine is also picking up in the typical Western diagnosis. And it is just such a different exploration and framing of similar things, where he's high IQ, he's 91st percentile for IQ, severe ADHD, sensory processing disorder. We just got that all done through a psych assessment in Western medicine terms. And you read his chart over 18 months ago or so, and picked up on all of that, but in your own terms, right? And in your own way, that was such a gift and nourishing language. And then going to how Western medicine describes it, it's all like a problem that must be solved. And in astrology, it was all a gift that must be nourished. And I just thought that was really cool that you picked up on the same things, but totally different framing. And so I also hope parents listening out there, like, don't let the label define you or your kids. There are so many other ways that we can express these values and nourish our kids to be leaders.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to hear that. That was such a powerful contribution. And it is so much my life's work to let the children be who they are, and let the astrology be echoed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to keep this conversation going with you, so please subscribe to our podcast and leave a rating and review to make sure you never miss an episode. Remember, climate activist by day, human by night. Send Debra a DM on Instagram at Debra Silverman Astrology, and visit DebraSilvermanAstrology.com. And we're going to leave you like we leave every single episode. Make it your mission to change the world.